Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of this beautiful camp show, whatever it is you want to call it. And in every time I do this, I try to share something, some aspect of the game that I wish I had known when I was a kid. And this particular thing I'm going to talk about today is, I think, it's very important, but it's also kind of difficult. And I think maybe many of you will just flat out disagree with it. The first time I heard it, I want to just admit, like, it was one of those things you hear and you're like, really? Is that really true? I think there's a lot of advice in life too. The first time you hear it, it's just going to be like, you're just either not going to get it or you're going to be like, whatever, and the things that you'll instantly kind of accept are things that really you believe in them already, And so this thing might be one of the things that, if you don't believe in it, I guess I just want to ask to just bear with me a moment, and I'll try to explain why, even if you don't think it's important, a lot of other people do. Okay, so here we go. I got this new old school Soviet coach, man, Soviet. We're talking old school. And of course, the old school guy's thinking about chess in a different way. And the key concept I'm going to talk about today is very old school. And what we're going to talk about is separating tactical positions from non-tactical positions. Now, the first thing I got to say about it is it's controversial because, especially if you grow up in a computer generation, the computer kind of sees, I think, just about every position as tactical. It always is going to show you like a long line, and it's rarely the case that, there'll be several moves that'll just be roughly equal. There's almost always like a best move. So when you look at it from the perspective of a computer, it will always seem like it's tactical. It will always seem like there's a best move. Now, before I talk a little bit more, I want to say I'm just showing this position. This is white to move. And you could, if you want, you could tell me what you think white should play, what you think is going on. I'm happy to call on you if you'd like. So anyways, here we go. Let me continue my spiel. I always give you a chance to think about this position. Again, it's white to move. You could think too, like, well, what do you think about the position? What factors do you see happening? So here we go. So the spiel is that if you don't think about this difference, what you're going to end up doing is you're going to end up hemming and hawing, going back and forth, spending all your time in positions that ultimately are simply about your intuition, the intuition you have about the position. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be good moves and bad moves on those intuitive decisions. It just means it's not going to help that much for you to think forever. In fact, a lot of times when you see guys think forever, or women, it won't be the best move. It's oftentimes like, you look at the clock, and I'm going to show some examples today of where the clock time kind of shows, hey, you didn't know, you didn't have a clue what to do with this position, and you should have just trusted your first gut instinct anyway. We got one comment. I think it is equal. Black has more breaks and white has the dark squares. Long think, wrong think. We got another comment, 95 followed by F4. The difference is space. And we're going to have a good position with plays such as C5, B4, B5. Okay. By the way, while you're thinking about this, I just want to throw this out there. One of the reasons I'm doing this now, I'm something I'm thinking about right now, is, I'm going to play my first tournament forever, Memorial Day weekend, so weekend after this one. And I'm kind of terrified, definitely terrified. And, obviously chess is going to be really different. I don't know what the demographics is going to be, who's going to show up. I guess I know in this tournament I'm playing in, there's a bunch of GMs, but just in general, with the whole pandemic, I have no idea like how strong people have gotten. Maybe they're just focused in on blitz. you know. And so today I'm going to talk a lot about time management and what the time management says about a given position. I'll explain more in a second. So one thing I'm interested in is just where are you guys playing next? I'm going to be in DC. I think people are talking in the chat about Chicago Open. Coast is playing National Open next month. And I don't even know of any tournaments after that. You know, I know it's kind of like this coming period of tournaments is like a test phase, you know, to see if more tournaments are actually going to happen. You know, I assume we got the typical like World Opens and stuff happening later, but I don't even, you know, I haven't even pursued it. So I'm kind of interested to see what's going on. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to mention the tournaments is what I'm going to talk about today in time management has everything to do like setting a tone for yourself, I think, in an approach to all kinds of different positions. And it's got to be said that the difference, the line separating tactical positions and non-tactical positions is pretty fuzzy, right? And it's not like you're always going to know. It might turn out like, hey, you're thinking that some position is non-tactical, but it actually is, you know. Okay, so let's think a little bit about what we mean and why the difference is important. You are going to need real time, like significant time, when the position becomes tactical. And when it becomes tactical, you don't want to play impulsive moves. You want to really have worked it out as best you can. That's where the game will truly be decided in terms of accuracy, in terms of, you know, really either, you know, saving yourself or finding a way to finish the game. That's where it'll be decided. And that's where, first of all, you're going to need to have some time on the clock banked, right? And also you're going to have to be aware. If you're aware in your mind, like, oh, this is a tactical situation, then you give yourself the license to say, okay, I am allowed to think for a little bit here. And, you know, I expect myself to think. I'm not going to allow myself to just make some move because it looks good, you know. Now, granted, like one of the things I'm selling you on is controversial because it's not always clear that you're going to know the difference or that there is a difference. You could argue there's no difference, Kraai. I'm just making some garbage up. Okay. Yes, Kosi is here to stalk you. Okay, so here in this position, I showed this to my Soviet coach, and I think he rightly yelled at me here. It's a really interesting moment. So here, I spent 15 minutes thinking about what to do here. Now, I'm going to try to like explain myself, and then we can talk. We're going to go through some different examples. We can also hear, I'd love to hear if somebody would like to, you know, come out and chat about what they see going on in the position. That would be interesting as well. But let me just say in this position, first I'll introduce the game. I was playing previous U.S. women's champion Sabina Feuser in this game. And I felt that she had definitely broken the rules. So just first I'll put it in my own context, you know. So to me, I am up, what are we talking about? I'm up one tempo because I got a knight out. I'm up another tempo because it's my move and I like my king position better. Now here's the point. When you're making a positional move, it's not like, you know, you have to move instantly, but if you start not thinking, or excuse me, if you're thinking for like 2 or 3 minutes and you're not thinking about anything tactical, like there's no variations that you're looking at, then you just need to move. You must move. And so I spent forever and I played B4 forever. And it's this time that later is going to hurt me. I mean, I end up losing this game. It has a lot to do with the fact that I thought forever on this move. Is B4 okay? Sure. Sure, it's fine. But think about it. I could play c5. I could play knight e5. I could play b4, maybe even some weird rook move. And honestly, all of that would have been better if I just done it right away, right? And so the point is, I'm starting to, go on this whole tangent of thinking forever. And it ends up really ruining me. And so a lot of it has to do with finding a rhythm. Now, honestly, look, I'm giving this speech to you guys because I know I myself am going to be in this situation in like a little bit over, in fact, less than a week, starts next Thursday. And I want myself to be ready psychologically to be unaware of this difference. And it has to do with rhythm and the sense that, right, you just have to move if you're not thinking about a bunch of variations, right? Let me give you an example. So I spent 15 minutes on this move. This is move 11. Let's fast forward to move. Actually, let me just say too, there's an interesting thing about when you take too long, especially on a positional situation. It means that you're unsatisfied with something. And in this case, I really felt like I deserved to knock her out. And that was like an emotional feeling that I needed to control. Yes, I'm definitely better, I feel, in this position, no question. But like knockout material, no, it's not even a tactical situation, So I really wanted to go for the throat and open it up on the queen side, b4, maybe b5, kind of irrational. And when you notice that you're spending forever, and you can notice this in your post-game analysis or, during the game, it's like a sign that there's like the time spent on the clock is showing you something about your own lack of understanding of the position. And so here's one of the key things that my Soviet sensei told me, that in terms of positional stuff, you're going to learn the positional stuff after the game. You're not going to learn it at the board. It's a really interesting idea. If you are going to learn that at the board, it should be on your opponent's move. Like when your opponent's thinking, that's when you should allow yourself to be thinking deep positional thoughts. Okay, so let me show you the position of move 20. And boom, it's white to move. And, this was one of these standard time controls that you guys are all about to play again, game 90 plus 30. And at this point, on this next move, I've got 35 minutes to begin with for the rest of the game. I'm only on move 20, bro. I need more time. I need more time. My opponent's just played a5. And the position is just like demonstrably more complicated than it was just a half a second ago. And I now need to, this is where I need time to think. So A, I needed more time in the bank. And B, this is the moment where she's provoking a crisis and I need to come up with something a little bit concrete. And I end up playing an impulsive move, rook ac1, which ends up giving me drama all of a sudden with the a2 pawn. Am I still better? Maybe I am, but rook ac1, not a good move, dude. Not a good move. I could have played h4, could have played queen c2, but I needed to think about it more. So you lose the time, A, and you're not going to have time. You're not going to feel psychologically able and also just technically able because you're not going to have that much time when it comes to the big decisions. Okay, so that's my spiel for us today. Let's look at another position. So I'm going to flip it. White's just played knight b5. What should black do? Kosti, they're talking about putting you in exile, buddy. Now it's not Costa's fault about the pole, man. That's Greg Shahada's fault. No one knows. We've lost pole ability. We've lost our pole position. All right, so here's the question. What should black do? What should he play in this position? I had this position against an IM. This was also shortly before the pandemic hit us here. What should black play in this position? Maybe d5. Okay, yeah. Now with d5, be aware, then there's knight c7. But d5 is a thought. Mm-hmm. All right, we don't got no pole abilities, buddy. Talk to Greg about it. It's truly Greg's fault. A lot of things in life are Greg's fault. A lot of things in life are Greg's fault, and this is one of them. This is one of them right here. Because I love poles, and I think it would be, especially for today, I want some poles, man. I want some poles. Knight f9, probably knight f8 was meant, but yes, knight f8. Yeah. So people talking about d5, knight c7 being promising, but bear in mind on d5 he can throw an ed before he plays knight c7. Definitely too frightening for me. Too frightening for me. So I thought this is also psychological. I thought forever and played knight e8. I'm talking forever. And really knight f8, as you guys said, would have been much easier to play. And honestly, if you're going to play knight f8 or knight e8, it should not take forever. And the thing about it, let's just look. Why am I dissatisfied with knight f8? It's kind of an interesting question. I'm dissatisfied because I'm seeing that, oh, now he can take with the pawn. And I wanted in the previous position to be able to play DC. But here, I've got I got two interesting options. I got the obvious, and then maybe rook c5, right? And we have ourselves an interesting position, and the game is going on. So there's two things I want you guys to see about this knight e8. I want myself to see it too. I'm saying it partly for my own benefit, is that when you got an intuitive decision like knight e8 versus knight f8, it's got to be made quickly. Especially if you've seen enough of, if you've stopped calculating, if you're just hemming and hawing, it's time to move. The second thing is, if you find yourself taking forever, this is most interesting actually in the post-game analysis. It's a sign that there's something about the position that you're deeply unsatisfied about. And for one, I felt my opponent hadn't played that great, and so I felt entitled to have an advantage here. Do I really have an advantage here? Probably not, Jesse. Probably not. You might have a little touch of a smudge, but not much, buddy. Not much. A lot of times that goes that way when you're black. You just get a position and you're solid and everything's mostly okay. But it might not be so special. So knight e8 is a weird move on which I took forever. And then what? I'm trying to prevent knight c7 so that I'm allowed to play bc dc. Totally weird. And on knight f8, bc, I don't know if that's white's best move. Doesn't even make that much sense. Coast, if you're listening, Aryan's got this straw poll thing. He thinks he's got a solution. He's got a solution. They're talking smack about you, Kostya. They're talking smack. Okay, so on this position, right, I spent forever, and in a maneuvering game, oh my God, if you take forever on every move, bad scene. So ideally, you can take 2 or 3 minutes to move, but it's got to go. You can't be tanking on these positions, because later there's going to become, some hectic thing is going to happen later. So for example, let's go to move 46. Well, interesting moment. I think most people would agree that black is better, but trying to find a way through, not so easy, and in this position, it's game 90, so it's not like I have forever. I think I had 11 minutes or so left here. Would have been great, if I had more time, of course, and B, it would have been really cool if I said to myself, oh man, yeah, this is the moment where if I'm going to crack the dude, it's coming now. And, the thing I needed to see, I ended up playing bishop g5, which as far as I can tell is mostly pointless. I should keep looking at this friendly pawn. And, with time, I think I would have found knight g6, bishop e8, knight e7, knight c6, snip the pawn, and then I have a totally reasonable chance at winning the game. I shouldn't even say snip the pawn. I'm just putting excellent pressure on the pawn, right? And from c6, I'm also hitting d4. Yeah. And I think, I just say you guys are kind of immune to this, I think. But for an old guy like myself, the business of the newer time controls, it's hard. It's hard, man. It's hard for us old guys. We're freaked out. We're freaked out by this because you have to move so fast. It's not like we didn't have to move fast before, but like we used to get more time at move 40. Okay, let me show you another one. Now, here's a game I think is kind of interesting where, to me, this is an example of where things went right. And I think it's important to see both the good and the bad when you're looking at a distinction like this with the tactical and the non-tactical. So here I'm playing a GM. I've got white. And one of the interesting things about moving fast sometimes and then moving slow other times is that when you take forever, it's often an indication that you don't understand what you're doing, right? So this position, I gotta say, is not something like I had like all planned out or anything. Though I'm sure if you look in the database, this Carlsbad from the Queen's Gambit Decline, I'm sure you'll find games from this position, but it's not like I knew them. But I did have a sense of the general ideas of the position. So here, I'll just ask a basic question. What should white play here? People saying e4, It's a thought. People saying h4, That's right. It's an interesting question, actually. What should he do? All right. E4 would certainly be the forcing way to do this. It is controversial, though, because there's two potential problems. There's knight e6, where you got to worry about d4, and there is takes knight g4 also as a potential issue. So here in this position, I spent no time. We got people talking about knight d1, knight d2, and e4. This might be actually a great point to point something out. I didn't mean to pun it like that, to point something out, but this position, right? I think it is. This thing about time management is really interesting. So this position, I feel like I have a pretty good intuitive understanding of what's going on. And when I was a kid, I would have certainly thought that the only plan for white here is e4. Not true. And that's something I understood here. If you play e4, things are going to get wild and tactical, and black's kind of set up to deal with it with his knight e6 and his knight hops away from f6. So what I understood here, and this has everything to do with being able to move kind of quickly, even though it's not a position, not an exact position I've seen before, is that the point of white's extra pawn in the center here is not just to play e4 someday, but to control the knight. So I quickly played bishop h4. Weird move if you haven't seen it before. But the idea is I get out of the way of knight e6. And if he moves the knight on f6, I say, no trade for you, buddy. No trade for you. No resolution of all that crampedness in your position. I'll just put it back on either f2 or g3, depending on where you move the knight. Yeah. Okay, so dude played knight e6. Now again, this is a move. I am certain that there's more than one move here. I really like the move I played, but I think there's more than one. What should white play in this position? I did write down my moves. One thing I'm hoping actually for the new let's call it the post-pandemic chess world, as I grew up and you'd have a score sheet, and you'd write physically down the name, the length of time that you spend. And, it then takes forever for me to input into a computer. Now, of course, the last year, when you see games on chess.com, whether it's a blitz game or a log game or on a different site, you can see exactly the amount of time spent, which is very helpful. Anyways, that's just a little side rant. We got a comment. I wouldn't be able to decide between rook a e1 and rook a d1. And the comment is bishop f2 to play e4. Okay, good. And I played quickly rook a d1. Important to know, rook a e1, not bad. Rook or bishop f2 also, I don't think, a bad move. Rook a d1 is in a lot of ways a positional move that I had seen similar ideas of, and it's very simple in that someday my d4 pawn might need protection if I'm going to play e4. And I wanted also to work against the idea of black playing c5. c5 won't save him, but it might alleviate a lot of his problems. Because in this position, I already think I'm tightening the noose. He's got cramped problems. Both of his knights are dominated, and both of his knights are in the way of his bishops. Okay, so black plays a6. This is a very common Queen's Gambit declined move. And what should white do? What should white play in this position? Any thoughts? Well, let's talk about the point of a6. a6 in general is almost always useful in these positions. For example, if black ever does play c5, it will be useful to control the b5 square. That's one point of a6. Also, though, we got to say, it's a little hard for the dude to find a plan. That's part of the joy of rook a d1 is it's like, oh, not so easy for dude to find a plan in this position. Okay, so yeah, any ideas? What should white play? We got f4 as a thought. That's kind of interesting. Definitely a very committal move. Yeah, I think someone wrote f4, knight g7. That does look like a good response to f4. Daniel, I love Daniel's comment, dude. It's exactly the way I felt, dude, too. Daniel says, king h1 and chill. Absolutely. And it's a great example of three moves I was able to play quickly in a row. And they're all, for the most part, non-tactical. It's not like tactics aren't there, right? Like I have to worry about c5, I have to worry about knight g7, some kind of knight f6 move. All that stuff is true. I got to worry about it. But in 2 or 3 minutes, I should be able to negotiate that especially if I understand the position, right? And so part of it is I'm holding e4 over his head. There's really no rush, and it's a real problem for him to not know when I'm playing e4, because it's only when I play e4 that his knights get to do, start hopping around. Okay, he plays knight g7. What should I do? Again, this one I played fairly quickly. Again, this is an example, this is a rare example. This is a rare example where I played it well. I'm going to show some more examples where things did not go my way in a second. But I thought it was important to show that when you're in the flow of things, it says two things. A, you've got good understanding that you have to make the positional moves quickly. And B, that if you are able to make them quickly, it's a sign that you have at least some understanding of the position. I'll show an example of position soon where I did not have good understanding of the position. I got a question. You mean you don't play well usually? Well, there's a lot of positions, I think for everybody, honestly. For everybody, there's positions that they play less well than others, and this would just be an example where of a position where I feel like I had some understanding. Yeah, we got people saying e4. I think in the database, some people did play e4. I like my move much better, much better. Bishop f2, that's right. And so you see part of the point of king h1 now is that when e4 happens, and then imagine e4, fe, fe, knight g4, then I've got bishop g1. Very important that I got bishop g1, so that no trades. The point is simply that when you have control over space and or the center, it's the opponent's minor pieces that are going to be run out of squares. And when you look at the position too, it's like no matter how well I play this position, black doesn't have any structural weaknesses, right? The most he's got is some bad pieces. And in the tactical mayhem that will inevitably happen, there's no doubt, let's just say that up front, I might be happy about playing these nice little fancy moves here, but there is no doubt that the tactical mayhem is going to start. It will start. And that's when I am going to need the time. So the madness happened. And here and the next move, I tanked. And one of the things that I want to stress about this is an example of things went well. And this is by all means the point in the game where I need to tank. Any idea about what white should do and guesses about what the evaluation of the position? Got a question. By the way, I'm going to try to answer this question, but I'm going to do so also just with the hope that it'll give you some time to immerse yourself in the position and to ask, what it is that white should do. Question was, why? Why would people do this to themselves as black? Interesting question. The Queen's Gambit Decline, definitely a classic opening. And of course, a lot of people play it's a classical move, but it's still to me a strange move. They play 3 e7 to avoid this instead of 3 knight f6. Like imagine d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop e7. That's one way to avoid this madness. Another way is to play a Nimzo move order, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight. And if they go knight c3, then you play Nimzo. And if they go knight f3, then you play your Queen's Gambit Decline. So a lot of people do avoid this. I do think it's fully playable for black. There's an art to it. And obviously black, there was small moves that happened here where black lost the thread. And then I got a question. You didn't whip out rook f3 immediately? Yeah. Rook f3, certainly not a bad move. And I think the move I played is actually as good as rook f3. Now, let me just stress something. Let me just tell a little bit about the process. I always go over the games without the computer first. And I want to just, try to review my sense of the position and why I did the things I did. Because once you see with the computer, it's all messed up. Like when you're analyzing with just by yourself, you could guess about, like, say, who's winning and why, or those kinds of things. We got another question between queen. Is it bishop c4 or is it queen b3? People are saying, I think white is better. And let's say some obvious stuff. Even though black has kind of got his pieces out of the gnarly bunch that they were on f6, e6, and e7, they're still pretty hokey and they're hanging all over the place, right? But what is he hoping for? He's hoping for a tactical solution to his problems. Totally understandable that he would try to find a tactical solution. Also understandable he would try to provoke a crisis in the position, by encouraging me to play e4. Okay, so I tanked here for 14 minutes and I started with 58 minutes. I had 58 minutes left after bishop g1. And that's probably a goal, actually, is you can get to move 20 and still have 60 minutes left on the clock. You're doing all right. The computer here, I don't know why I'm telling you this because it doesn't matter too much, but the computer says black is lost. I didn't know black was lost. I played bishop c4, and I think from an intuitive perspective, it totally makes sense. Rook f3 does as well, but the bishop on d3 is not going to hit h7, and it's in the way of my beautiful rook on d1. So that's the positional basis for it. But of course, the question is, what are you going to do here? And this is what I had to calculate. So I said, boom, boom, boom. That was my intention. And it's still very complicated. And even though I had calculated a lot here, and I felt I was either clearly better or winning, still, oh man, still pretty intense. So the guy, again, made a sensible move in terms of creating complications, played bishop e3. And at this point, I got, what do I got? I got 39 minutes left. So what should I play? What should I do in this position? We got one person saying d5. Certainly a contender. Rook d3 is another option people are giving. Any other ideas for white? On this move, I spent, what do we got here? 23 minutes. Yeah, what is the point of queen b7? I guess that's something we should address. And honestly, yeah, bishop e3 is kind of interesting, right? Well, why not queen b7? Why not queen b7? Any ideas? What is wrong, if anything, with that move? Certainly looks plausible, right? The issue, though, is maybe he survives with that. Now, am I better? I'm going to go ahead and say I think I'm better. But there's an obvious problem. I got to worry about knight f2. I got to worry about weird knight g3 stuff. I got to worry about rook c7, queen h4. So ideally, I don't want to snip the pawn. Okay. So this, again, this is an example of where things went right because I had time in the tank, and B, I understood that this was the tactical moment where I had to figure everything out. And, you know, maybe I'm slower than most, you could say, right? Maybe I'm slower than most in calculating, but I knew that I had to be super careful in this position and it had to be done right. So one thing that I saw that was mostly correct is I saw that this was a very feasible idea. I did not do this, but I'm going to show you a fun variation. Oh la la. Let's go a little slower. And now he's just totally toast. That, though, as I'm sure you could tell, was the most complicated thing ever imaginable. And actually, I'm going to show you something even more complicated in a second. But it's an example definitely where if you're going to do it, you know, you need to be super sure. So I went for the more mundane line that I felt I could calculate more clearly. And I saw pretty well to the end here. So knight f6, and I saw that I had to judge that obviously I'm winning the queen, but also I had to come to an understanding that I was at least much better and probably winning. And here he makes a mistake with this move, and maybe he could try this. And I'm either clearly better or I'm winning. I would guess I'm winning. But in any case, this might have been the better way, and which would prove that on a technical level, rook takes f7 is probably the stronger move. But in terms of taking the time and figuring out that I could get to that where I'm winning, position where I'm winning the queen, you know, and then try to evaluate it, correct, absolutely correct. And the time spent was correct. All right, I'm going to show another position where things went wrong. This is the only position I'm showing today where things went right. Okay, let's take a look over here. And I was black over here, so let's start here, and I'm going to flip the board. Yeah, this is black to move. Take a moment to reflect on what you think it is that black should play. And also, you know, try to ask yourself, if you think black's better, does black deserve to be better? That kind of thing. Yeah, definitely a fascinating position. I'm going to do a little bit of blah, blah here that pertains to our point, but it's definitely a little bit of blah, blah. One of the things that is curious about chess, right, is you don't always get positions that you're really comfortable in. And I'm thankful for this opening. I think black's got a very rich position. Not much more you can really ask. Obviously, the knight on c1 is a little funky looking for white. I got some of my own problems too. But it was a position where it was very hard for me to have an exact sense of what to do. And in the last example, what I think you saw was it was a kind of position where I just had an intuitive sense of what to do. And here I don't really. And here I really tank. Oh my gosh, I took like 18 minutes on this. I go from, yeah, I lost an immense amount of time. I think we started with, I don't know, 140 or something. So a little bit more than your typical 90 minutes. Anyways, I tanked forever and I played a move that maybe is not so bad, c5. I think in hindsight, I should have played boom, boom, boom. And one thing that's interesting just to talk about time spent and understanding of the position is, what this position has a lot of similarities with is like a Breyer variation of the Ruy Lopez. Obviously, a little bit different, but we're going to see some more Breyer ideas in a second. And I showed this to GM Josh Friedel, and this was his first instinct as to what Black should do. And I came up with this plan like in my post-game analysis, without the computer. And it took me forever being, thinking about what I should be doing in the position. So I played C5 and he plays D5. And I guess this would be more appropriate to talk about this as a Breyer kind of move. And here, again, I think originally I was thinking about, I should be thinking about C4 to dominate the knight. And then I was unsatisfied with it. And so I end up taking forever again on this move. Forever. I play here. He plays a weird move, bishop C3. And I want to ask you guys, what should I play in this position? I've got a question. How do you improve playing faster and not wasting time on positions where it doesn't help? Well, I think my hope is looking at examples like this. I think this is actually a really good one. This particular example right here are very helpful, in particular of going over your games. When you go over your games, what you will hopefully get is like an intuitive sense of when to think and when not to think, right? And this particular example is pretty interesting. Let's just note that, here I'm playing an FM, and FM, I end up losing this game. It's a terrible game, but he's made a bunch of positional moves that aren't really have a lot of sense. And bishop C3 certainly smells kind of funny, right? We've got a great comment from Austin, and that is this variation. Knight E4, rook E4, knight D5. Now, here's the thing that I want to talk about. This is one of the reasons I think it's such an interesting example, is that I ended up playing A5. And the biggest crime about A5, I want to say, is that I took too long in doing it. That's the biggest crime. Now, here's the thing about knight E4. Knight E4 is a move that I think if you're a Breyer player, you're going to kind of have on your radar. And I only had it on my radar really after the game when I did my own analysis. And the thing about knight E4 that I want you to see is, even though it's a madness position and, very hard to judge, it's ultimately a positional decision. And what I mean by that is an intuitive decision. And you could say to me, like, Kraai, what are you talking about? This is madness. Obviously, there's all kinds of things to calculate. And what I'm going to actually say is no. I'm going to say, if you want to do this move, knight E4, you either, if you see it, then you do it. And, you just going to have to trust it. If that's what your intuition is, you do it. It's a very interesting way to think about chess because, I think especially when I was a kid, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to sack something. I better have a very clear sense of what's going on. Well, when you look at it, obviously there's a number of problems the dude has. And you could spend hours sitting at the board trying to figure this thing out. I think you just need to see a couple variations, honestly. You don't need to see too much. And when I was after the game, is really interesting because after the game, I managed to convince myself that this was maybe not so hot for Black, and I came up with this move, knight E2. And I was like, oh yeah, knight E2, that makes me worried. I definitely don't want to, get the two pieces for the rook. At least I don't think that's anything too special for Black if I do that. So I'm looking at it. Me and Josh Friedel spent some time on it. And he wasn't really convinced either that, like, I'm winning or anything. And the weird thing is, like, let's look at this variation. Now, you could say to yourself, okay, I'm not winning anything. And now I'm feeling really nervous. Or you could say to yourself, oh my gosh, definitely clear compensation. Definitely clear compensation. But you're never going to be able to work it out fully. And 92, that's just one of many moves that dude can play, right? So one of the amazing things about this choice between 94 and what I did with A5, oh man, oh man, it's ultimately an intuitive decision, right? And many players, honestly, 94 won't even cross their radar. And the only time it'll really cross their radar is if, they've seen some kind of position that's similar, right? Some kind of similar thing. And if they don't see it, staring at the board forever isn't honestly going to help them. It didn't help me. And A5 wasn't a bad move. I just took too long doing it. I just took way too long doing it, man. So here, I'll show where I kind of blow the game, and I attribute it to those moments that I just was sharing. So I was in this position. Both sides have made numerous mistakes, but black, I think, is fundamentally fine. Play a move like rook e7, and if I want to, I can put the bishop either here or on e5. Fine, dude, fine. Instead, I'm in pretty good time pressure. These days you got 30 seconds. It's not necessarily time pressure, but it's not enough time to really think through stuff. And I played bishop d4. And of course, in these positions, you do not want to trade the rooks. And he correctly found rook f4. Then there's a tactical problem. I cannot play this because of king f1. So I had to trade. And then I think, lost, because with the rook and the bishop, the advantage is that your bishop's controlling 13 squares in the center. The rook only ever controls 14. But if you lose your rook, you lose your access to the light squares. So I think it's important to connect the two mistakes, right? I made part of the genesis of this bishop d4 blunder has everything to do with the fact that I tanked and not only spent time, but a lot of energy on moves where it should have been an intuitive decision. Okay, we got somebody confirming that A5 is real natural. And Austin makes a great comment here. He's saying Fischer-Spassky World Championship game is where the idea comes from. We're talking about 94, knight d5. And yeah, there's going over classic games, and your own games will give you a vocabulary of different plans. And just because you see it once doesn't mean your mind will immediately light up and play 94. And that 94, even after you see it, you might just have an instinctive distrust of it. I kind of did myself. And this maybe is a little off topic, but when I'm playing an FM, I usually feel like, oh, I shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to work so hard, man. It shouldn't be so hard. But of course, sometimes it is Kraai. Come on, get away, get off of the sauce. Okay, let's continue. Now I'm going to show you the most embarrassing example, the most embarrassing. Here, I was playing some 2200 Fisciolini. And we got this position. It's pretty standard so far. And what's interesting is the guy doesn't know what to do except to attack me wildly. And so in this position, he starts going crazy with knight h4. I thought in this position, I was like, okay, I'm a little bit better. Nothing special for myself here, but I thought I was better. And he comes at me here. Now, this is misguided in a variety of ways. One of which is the king side is my strong side. It's where I have more pawns than he does. I have my force count's beautiful over there, and there's really no easy access for him to be doing his business there. So I kind of had a scornful attitude. And we're going to see my mistake has something to do with time, but also this attitude was really not serving me well. And what we saw, a lot of my mistakes, a lot of it had to do with either a misappraisal of the position or, a misappraisal of the position and then an impulsive move that then leads to disaster. And so here we go. G3, bishop H3. Basically, the kid, I feel like he's on the wrong side of the board, and he's really pushing his luck. So here I have plenty of time. Plenty of time. And I see the game continuation, and I don't really look too deeply at it. Now, I'm still winning even as it is. Well, I shouldn't say winning, because I play F4, and what I had evaluated was that the kid should play Queen G6 and go into a bad ending like this, you know. And the knight's dominated, my king's better, I got the d5. It's just a party. It's just a party for white. But he plays this, and I was like, I know that doesn't work, boss. I was like, I know that doesn't work. And okay, so here's maybe I'll end with this example because it's so embarrassing, and it's exactly the kind of thing that I cannot have happen if I want to make any kind of progress with chess. Also, if I just want to enjoy chess, I can't have the following happen. So, my next couple moves, I just spent a couple minutes. And let's just be obvious. If I can take the knight, the game's over. The game's over, dog, right? So, dude, this is your moment. Just like in the first example I showed where things went well, I should be spending, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes just to make sure, checking and double checking. Time's not, you don't need the time anymore. The game's over, dog. If you can take the knight, the game's over. So I snipped, check to the miserable king, king H1. And let's just say, like, why did I move so fast? Because intuitively, I knew that I had enough force count in the position to deal with this silly bishop and queen. All right, so let's talk about it. He plays queen F2. I played my next move. I hate to say it. I played it instantly. And oh man, it's really painful. So, question. Besides thinking, what should white play here? Rook G1. Rook G1 is certainly a move. And on Rook G1, like Rook E2, Queen D4 will happen. I believe white, I'm going to say it's clearly better in that position. I don't know if it's more than that, but definitely clearly better. Bishop F1. All right, we got Bishop F1 as a suggestion. I'm just going to admit it. I played that move instantly. And how did I lose instantly? How did I lose instantly? Again, why you guys are looking for it. The theme of this was that there's a difference between tactical positions and non-tactical positions. And feeling the difference is important for establishing your rhythm, for understanding, like, do you even understand the position? And also that you will need the time later. Here, I even had the time, but I didn't recognize that I was dealing obviously I must have recognized that I was dealing with a tactical situation, but I didn't say to myself, okay, boss, this is the moment where you have to slow it all the way down. Yep, and we got Bishop G2. And I'm sitting there like a fool. I'm like, I got 1,000 minutes on the clock. The kid's like packing up his gear, getting ready to go. And I'm like, oh man, how did this happen to me? Somebody did find the best move here. It's definitely a winner. Bang, Queen H7. And I'm completely winning. Very painful. Very painful, my friends. So just to summarize, there is a difference between the tactical and the non-tactical. It's a fuzzy line. And if you analyze, I think, strictly with the computer, it's going to be hard to see what that line is, because the computer will always think some moves better than others. But the point is, at some level, you're going to have to trust your instinct on moves where it's not possible to calculate, or you can't calculate. And there will come positions, though, where you're going to have to get very concrete, and you're going to have to say to yourself, all right, boss, here's a time we're going to have to spend loads of minutes, loads. And it's hard, man. You got to sit there. You got to sit there in a position like this. Obviously, with Bishop F1, I was like, okay, I'm winning the game. I'm going to be the one packing up. I'm going to go watch some dumb sitcom in my hotel room. No, that wasn't me. That was the kid, man. Okay, guys, thank you very much. If you did not see this whole thing, it will be posted to YouTube, as are all the other videos. And if Greg lets me back, I'll be here in, I don't know, sometime he'll let me back and we'll do another one. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.